Ravi, it is good to see you. You started out by asking me about the stress that I had, or the energy transfer that I was giving, which was basically, hey, it's been one of those rough mornings. And it turned into an awesome conversation where I gave a quick update on my side, and then you gave an update on your side. Congratulations are in order. Well, a long time coming, because this is a journey that you've been on for a number of years. And I just learned that you have a 3-year-old in the house and a 9-month-old in the house. And I asked the question, I said, how has that changed you? And you said, from what perspective? So we're bringing everybody up to speed on the conversation, and then said, hey, let's hit record and share it. So how has getting married, having a couple of kids, having a second kid shifted your perspective over the course of the last couple of years?
Oh, well, the last time we spoke, as I mentioned, I don't think I was married. I got married in 2021, so it's many years now. But the son, 9 months old, my daughter, 3 years old, and it has changed me in the best of ways. The best way to put it is it's forced me, or rather, it's gifted me with the opportunity to elevate as a man and as a human being. And I heard this quote ages ago, and it's stuck with me ever since, Mike, and maybe you resonate with it. Daughters, they will marry your example, and sons, they will follow your example. And okay, sweeping statement, but the core message behind it rather hit me deep. And one of the things that it has really accelerated is me looking at every pillar of my life and knowing that the more I do the inner work, the more the dream works. And the dream being ensuring that at some point in the future, my kids actually want to hang out with me, right? Once I'm past the good old days, and it's crazy, Mike, right? Right now, I remind myself and my wife all the time, I'm like, Soph, we are in the good old days right now. Like one day we're going to be talking about this. And it's crazy, man. It's crazy. I felt every emotion available in the human experience, right? Every emotion available, and just what a gift.
It is an absolute gift, and it happens so fast.
Mm.
I'm a bit further along on the journey. Jen and I now no longer have teenagers in the family. And that happened just a couple of days ago. Our youngest turned 20. So our youngest turned 20. Our oldest is now 23. And September's a big month for us. It's when Jen and I got married a number of years back, 27 years ago, here in just a couple of days. And we're in that season, that next season, which includes falling in love with each other again, the shift, what the future looks like so many different things happen, and you hope that you didn't screw it up over the course of time as you look at it, and that you're there both in the modeling of, how'd you say the quote? The daughters marry, say the quote again for us.
The quote goes something along the lines of, your daughters will marry your example, your son will follow it.
And you hope that you set a good example. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is sometimes you hide the bad example type stuff. And the bad examples that you hide create significant risk that those bad examples are going to continue to repeat if you don't take the time to really work through them and help them build and move things along. So a couple of things. Number one, it happens super, super fast. And for whatever reason, time continues to accelerate as you get a little bit older. Well, congratulations. And I can't believe it's been that long. And thank you for sharing.
Oh, it's been a minute. And one thing I'd love to ask you, actually, and I am curious to know, is now you've got a 20-year-old and a 23-year-old. If you would take it back 17 to 20 years, and you could give that version of yourself one piece of advice with kids that young, what would you say to him now? Besides, it goes so fast.
Don't be so hard on yourself.
Well,
so I grew up Catholic. So there's a lot of Catholic guilt, like just deep. He,
Mm.
Irish Catholic, a little bit of German in the background, like Swedish and English. So if you pull all of those together and then build in being the oldest of seven kids and living on the East Coast and living on the West Coast, or all of the different things that move along, I've grown up with a lot of guilt. So
Mhm.
that creates a lot of space for reflection. And sometimes that reflection can be positive and sometimes it can be negative. So a quote that comes from a person that's very important to me from a mentorship perspective. It actually comes from his father-in-law, Admiral Payne. So do your best and forgive yourself. So do your best and forgive yourself. I didn't come across that quote until much later on. And I think the thing that I would tell myself is, hey, it's all going to be okay. You're going to figure some things out. You're going to learn as you go through. And the more time and space you give yourself for learning and reflection and then changing and iteration, the better things will get. Do your
Mhm.
best and forgive yourself, to take the quote from Admiral Payne.
I love that. I love that, my friend. It's something that has really hit me on an intuitive level, more so over the past year than ever before, which I knew on an intellectual level, but it hits differently now, which is the idea that our younger self did the best they could with the consciousness that they had at the time. And if they knew better, they would have done better. And when I can look back on prior versions of myself, it's now I can look at it with empathy versus why did I do that? Ah, that sucks. You know what I mean? So evolution is a beautiful thing. And you know what? One thing I want to acknowledge you for is even though you and I have probably only connected like this twice, maybe three times max, one thing I've always appreciated about you is how you wear your heart on your sleeve and you lead with vulnerability. And what you see is truly what you get. When I talk with you, I feel very at home instantly. And that's a superpower, man. So I just want to acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. I've never thought about it as a superpower,
It
and it
is.
comes up more and more, especially in like this piece around like asking questions, the ability to ask questions, which I know you get into in your book, and that's the reason why we ended up getting here. And I had a copy of the book right here. For those of you who are watching on video, I had to go off camera. I had a copy of the book here. And this was the catalyst for this conversation. It's Ravi's new book, A Relationship Currency. And we'll get into it. I never appreciated the importance of being able to ask questions and asking questions from a space of genuine curiosity, like an intent to learn and listen. And the next piece that kind of came out of this, and I'm very interested in your perspective on it, is that when you ask questions with genuine curiosity and intention to learn, you find that people will open up a bit more to you, because it's very rare that people actually engage with them at that level. Sometimes people ask the question and you just get the, hey, how's your day going? And the response is good. And then people move on because they don't think the person on the other end cares. Is that a true thing? Like, is that an experience that you've had out there where some people struggle with the idea of people really caring, and some people struggle with the idea of presenting yourself in a way where you do care, because as a human being, I believe you truly do. And thanks for recognizing it as a superpower, because I've never really considered it that way.
I really think it is one of your many superpowers. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about, which may actually answer your question. If it doesn't, we can go deeper into that. But when I asked you how you were,
Yeah.
you didn't say, yeah, fine, cool. You gave me such a deeply honest response. And because it was grounded in vulnerability, you gave me the permission to give you a vulnerable story in return. And that beauty is what we call reciprocity. And I think that's what you do so naturally. And it's incredible. And a lot of the time we talk about, okay, no, how can you tell a great story? And I say this because a lot of the people who I connect with, work with, mentor, this is what they want to do at a fundamental level. But we forget that when you ask the right questions, you can have somebody tell you an incredible story. When you lead with a vulnerable story or message yourself, it gives others the permission to remove their mask and do the same in return. So it's not always just about, okay, here's the story arc and how can you deliver this in 60 to 90 seconds? Actually, that's surface level. There's a lot going on way before that.
Why do we wear masks?
Why do we wear masks? I believe, to grossly oversimplify this, but on a fundamental level, I believe that it's grounded in a story of I'm not enough. Because if we deeply believed we were enough in that given moment, then showing up as who we are, contextual to that scenario, and being unapologetically self-expressed would feel normal. Now, it's really interesting. I'm a part of a men's mastermind, and there was a guy in the group. I won't mention his name out of integrity to him because I don't know if I'm okay to do it. But we were all talking about a few different topics. And this individual said, it's not about looking for safety in the external world. It's about cultivating safety within yourself and within your own nervous system for you to feel comfortable enough. So a lot of the, to share your story, message, or truth. So a lot of the time we can say, oh, I just, I can't be myself around this person, or I can't just open up or whatnot. But actually this quote, or rather what he said, the nugget of wisdom behind it is when we cultivate that internal safety, we don't look for it in the external world. It evaporates.
It's amazing what the mind can do when you give it space to do it, right? Like that whole piece, like it's almost like, if I hear it right, there's the mask is part of a defense mechanism to help avoid risk and prevent failure. But sometimes the mask ends up preventing success and prevent connection and prevents engagement.
Yes, and I've got so much to add to that, but I would love to know from your truth, from your lens and perspective, what do you see as the reason why people wear a mask?
Yeah. So I think it's very hard for people, or I think it shifts over time, and I think you'll see it with your kids as they grow up. And if you reflect on yourself, you'll see it in yourself. At first, you're just trying on new masks to figure out what the right one is. Which one fits for me? Where do I go? Like right now, I'm literally black t-shirt and board shorts just about 99% of the time. If you see me out in public speaking, I'll have a pair of jeans on. But this is me embracing me, get what I feel comfortable with. And it's not for everybody else, but I couldn't do those kind of things back when I was working at UPS in different roles where I had to wear a suit and a tie at the airport and that kind of stuff. And that's not me. So I think we put on these masks as we start to play different roles and characters and feel where we feel comfortable. And then over time, I think the risk is, at least the risk that I've fallen into, is sometimes you downplay your true self to present in the way that you think others want. But the reality is, when you present your true self and have that integrity and that authenticity, people tend to lean into it or get repelled by it. And the good news is the ones who get repelled by it, don't worry about them anyway. They're not worrying about you. The ones who lean into it, you're starting to build this kind of tribe and this group and this connection. So I think the reason why the reason why I've historically worn different masks is because, one, I was just testing things and trying to figure out what my flow is and what was right. And then early on in the career, didn't really feel comfortable pushing outside the boundaries. And then over time, started to realize, hey, this is what actually makes me unique. And it's where I can provide the greatest amount of value, is when I embrace that character that I really am, my true self. That's my perspective. What do you think?
What do I think? Well, it sounds as though, from what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that a younger version of you, which was trying on different masks until you had the confidence is the wrong word, but I'm going to use it here, the confidence to wear the mask that truly matters and is authentic to you, which is your own, which isn't a mask, right? And now you're the dude who wears board shorts and except when you're out speaking, but board shorts and a t-shirt, and that is what feels authentic to you. And also what I'm hearing is something I believe deep in my core is the more comfortable you become in your own skin, the more wearing a mask feels suffocating. And look, as a recovering people pleaser, everything you've said hits. And one thing that I've realized in my own life is wearing a mask may lead to a version of success that is arguably superficial. Why I say that is because you may attract people, projects, opportunities, but are they the right people, projects, and opportunities? Because they are falling in love with the human being wearing the mask. And gosh, do we not see it on social media today? Do we not see it in the world that we live in today where congruency is just becoming increasingly more important? And Mike, I don't know about you, man, but something that I've seen, which actually at one point it upset me. I was like, oh, this really sucks, is when I've met people who have a lot of influence online, yet who they are when the camera and lights are off is completely different. And there's a lack of congruency, which is why I think congruency is so important today.
How would you differentiate between congruency and integrity?
I think they're very, very closely linked, meaning congruency for me is, in a nutshell, walking your talk. However, say if I don't walk my talk and I say to you, hey, Mike, you know what I just said on that call with the leadership team yesterday? I've reflected on it, and actually that kind of sucked. And I can imagine that would have made you feel less than. And that wasn't my intention. And I want to be in integrity with myself here and call that out and apologize. So I think integrity is a value and a lifestyle. Congruency is the overarching theme of capturing the behavior of walking your talk. What do you think?
I agree, and that's the word that came up as you were talking through congruency and that piece, the story around those situations where you meet people, and when you meet people, you realize a lot of what they say is just what they've scripted out. It's a narrative that they're sticking to, not necessarily what they've embodied and what they've embraced. And part of the design that I've put out there with the video that I put out there and the whiteboard and all the structure is what you see is what you get. Like, this is it. Like, a conversation with me before we turn the mic on and after we turn the mic on is the same. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not employable. So sometimes what'll end up happening is I will get it. There might be a little bit of a mask on that's on there initially because you may just not be ready for the really deep stuff that's ultimately going to change the way your business works and change the way you think about it. But then once we're close and we've agreed that our objective is the objective, which is growth and moving things forward, then I'm going to be really, really direct. And it's not that I'm going to be unkind. It's that I'm going to ask questions that will reveal instances where you may or may not have integrity relative to the things that you're saying. Here are the priorities, but what you're focusing on here where you start to change shiny things. And it's a very interesting conversation because when you lack integrity or lack congruency, your structure is no longer stable. And that's where the structure can start to fall apart. And now you start to waste energy trying to be something you're not. What if you actually found the people who are and brought them in to do the things that you're trying to do there so that you're not in this constant conflict of wasting energy in a number of different places? Why do people present a different version of themselves when they turn the camera on or when they're up on stage, but then act differently in the background? What's the draw toward that? Like, why do people allow that to happen? And maybe this is another just kind of iteration of the discussion around the mask. But why does that happen?
I don't know. I don't know is my honest answer, because I think, or rather, I believe that there's so much nuance required to answer this question
Yeah.
in an effective way. I'll give you an example. Beyonce. She created, I bet you didn't expect me to go there. Beyonce, she created an alter ego called Sasha Fierce. And the idea behind it was not to be fake when she was on stage, but it was in order to allow her to play to her maximum and unlock her full potential by embodying her most magnetic character traits. Now, there's a guy who actually has a book. I haven't read it myself, but I have had a few conversations with him. His name is Todd Herman, and he actually worked with Kobe Bryant on helping him craft the Black Mamba back in the day.
Yep.
There's a lot of work around this, so I would be very intrigued to know his take. But for me, why do we present different versions when the camera is rolling and not? I would say that there are three things coming up for me right now. Number one is that idea and notion of, am I truly enough? Or rather, that internal question of, am I truly enough? Number two is, I feel as though we've been trained for that to be the norm. When I was a kid, I would switch on the TV and I'd hear, "Welcome to Channel 4 News. My name is Mary Shea and I'm here to," right? What are you hearing? You're hearing a phone voice. You're hearing a corporate voice. So you would then embody that because you think that's what good presenting looks like. So there is some truth to the quote that you can't be what you can't see. And I feel as though over the past few decades, more actually since the beginning of time, really, there's always that individual who breaks the mask, breaks the mold in the relevant industry, shows up unapologetically self-expressed, and inspires the next generation to do something similar. Now, where the problem lies is when somebody says, Steve Jobs, love his energy. I'm going to wear a black turtleneck. I'm going to grow my hair and I'm going to talk exactly like him. When actually it's less about mimicking what the individual is wearing and the tone and the inflection. Actually, it's seeking inspiration from them showing up unapologetically self-expressed. How do you feel about that?
I think it's super powerful, and it goes into one of the questions, because I do want to talk about the book.
Yes.
I think it's a very interesting perspective, and maybe it is another iteration of that whole idea of, I need to test, I need to play, I need to try on different costumes, different masks to go out there and see what works, what makes me feel comfortable, what makes me feel like I've got to go take a shower afterward because it just doesn't represent who I am or what I am. And that inner voice is so important to listen to in the process, to be able to say and reflect, is this me? Is it what I'm becoming? Is it what I want to be? Or is it so far out of line with where I'm going and what I want to do that it actually requires additional energy to go do, and ultimately will create the risk of burnout? Very interesting stuff. So one of the questions that I've got is, what is charisma?
So growing up, I mean, I had charisma all wrong. Truly, I had it all wrong. I thought it was about attention, accolades, awards, being the center of attention, receiving significance, and I was wrong. But going back to that point, I give my younger self the kudos for doing the best they could with the consciousness that they had at the time. And luckily, I've evolved. Now, as I look at it today, and this is actually habit 3, inside of my book, Relationship Currency, which is called Unearth Your Charisma. And as I define it, as I see it, charisma is an innate superpower that we all possess, which allows others to feel significant in our presence. So the idea here is making people feel like they matter when they're around you is true charisma.
Can you really make people feel anything?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. I'll give you an example. Let's say that somebody listening to this is delivering a client pitch with their team member tomorrow. They're a leader. They're going to go in with their team member tomorrow. And it's maybe their second pitch inside of the company. So they go in, the team member delivers this pitch, and it was incredible. It was absolutely masterful. And afterwards, they go up to Jamie and they say, Jamie, great presentation. That was incredible. And Jamie's like, wow, do you really think so? And they're like, yeah, I do. They feel good for about a minute. They feel acknowledged on some level, but arguably that's surface level. What that's missing is three things: authenticity, specificity, impact. For me, when you can acknowledge somebody for their genius using the ASI framework, you don't just inspire trust and loyalty, but you inspire somebody to own their genius. Now, a prior version of me in my 20s, when my mentor would acknowledge me for my genius, my gifts, I would want to run through a brick wall for him, but it made me realize I need to double down on this. So not only does it benefit me, but it benefited him. Now, research has actually shown that a genuine compliment activates the same part of our brain that lights up when we receive a financial reward. So if we think about the power of a genuine compliment and how it can make somebody feel something and shift their perspectives and inspire change, it's incredible. Now, what does a compliment actually look like embodying the ASI framework in our example? So I could say, hey, Jamie, that was one of the most incredible and masterful client pitches I've ever seen you deliver. A couple of minutes in, when you shared that vulnerable story about you struggling with diabetes for your entire life and how you somehow made it connect with the fitness tracker we sell, it was incredible. It blew my mind, and it really connected with Jim across the room. I saw his face, and hey, that's actually inspired me to be more open and use storytelling in my own pitches. So hey, thank you for that. That has several layers, but also it has proximity, because there's a difference between that's a great presentation and I believe that was a great, incredible, masterful presentation. The proximity really stimulates connection and intimacy, but more importantly, it reduces the connection gap between two human beings. And that's just one way to make somebody feel like they actually matter when they're around you, AKA embody true charisma.
This is one of the things that scares the crap out of me related to a lot of the AI based coaching that folks are starting to adopt and starting to integrate into certain workflow, and this kind of disconnect where we're starting to say, hey, how can we use technology to enable and empower and amplify our team, which is what an emerging technology like AI is. It's a tool to enable and empower humans to do better human things. I firmly believe that. But I think what we're forgetting, and you've got to go back in and just listen to Ravi share that story and how you feel as you go through it. There's a connection that happens there, a direct connection that happens there. It is very specific, and it shares the impact, which helps with transition, which is ultimately what I think about when I think about stories. Like, what are stories doing? They're helping transition. They're helping share that transition that happens, conversion from point A to point B. And I wonder if we're going to lose a bit of this as we start to apply so much technology to try to solve the challenge of increasing growth and developing people inside organizations. Any thoughts around that? Is there a risk that technology disconnects us from what you were able to create there? And is there an opportunity to actually use technology to do other things so that you find more space to do that experience that you just created there? What do you think?
This is a difficult question because once again, there's so much nuance and this is so new. This is so new. Something I've been toying with
Yeah.
is having an AI version of me embody my frameworks, my books, my coaching, and having it on tap for clients 24/7. And where I'm at with it is that is, in my books, as of now, how I feel about it is that is more effective than saying to somebody, hey, by the way, when you've got a question, just email me. I'll make sure I come back to you within 24 hours. How incredible. Sorry, you're going to say something?
I'm listening. I think this is it's the battle that people are going through. So keep going. So the more impactful. Why is it more impactful that someone can go get immediate access in that kind of environment from your perspective?
I feel as though speed is important in today's world. However, we can't confuse that for instant gratification, which I really think is the villain in our story as a collective society today. Sales growth, we want it now. Leadership growth, we want it now. More partnerships, we want it now. And really, that desire for instant gratification leads to reactive behavior. Now, I'm going to define reactive behavior in alignment with the spiritual wisdom of Kabbalah, which sees it as any behavior which is grounded in lack, scarcity, or fear. So, for example, the salesperson who is speaking to a prospect who knows deep in their heart their service is not right for the prospect, yet they prescribe it anyway because they want to hit commission. That leader who hoards information because they don't want their number two to surpass them, or the entrepreneur who says they want to impact the world, yet they consistently behind doors put profit over their people. Going back to that congruency and integrity thing. So really what it means for us is how can we slow down? How can we get grounded? How can we operate in a place that's from deep alignment? And going back to this point of slowing down, whilst AI will allow us to speed up in many senses, how can we use it to supplement what we're doing versus replace the hard work? So for example, if AI could give me a six-pack, or if AI could give the world a six-pack, so many people would say, yeah, let's do it. They've got a six-pack. They've got the outcome. However, you haven't transformed your identity in the process to become the type of human being that can sustain that six-pack and grow it into an eight-pack. So the mindset hasn't shifted. The hard work hasn't been done. So what are we left with? A lack of resilience. And we're left with people with the end result, but no way to keep it. So for me, I'll give you an example with a one-on-one client of mine. She is a leader for a very large company, and we created a story bank for her, allowing her to pull from various stories inside of her pitches, presentations, and team meetings. But she knows the story arc that I teach. She knows the principles for effective storytelling that I teach. So what she then does is she uses AI when she's got her story and she's got the framework. She says, hey, be my thinking partner here. That, I think, is a beautiful thing. When we substitute or outsource the work and the thinking to AI, that's where I feel the problem lies. So I don't know what I said, but hey, that's what felt true for me in the moment. What about you? How do you feel?
Here's what I heard. Use it as a tool to enable progress, not to replace your capability. And there's a couple of different components there. So you've heard Ravi over the course of, I have no idea how long we've been going. It looks like 30 some odd minutes. Pick up the book, pick up Relationship Currency, and get into the habits that are highlighted in here. I've intentionally stayed away from going deep into the content. There's a couple of different questions that I've got based on the structure of the book that I think will help folks kind of draw into it. And the first one is habits. What are habits?
Mm. So for me, to answer that question, let me lay out why I call it the 5 habits
Okay.
of communication. What I'm saying to people is that if you want true change, you're going to need to finish this book in its entirety. And it's short, right? I'm talking like less than 150 pages on purpose. You're also going to need to take imperfect action, meaning there's no prizes right here for, I've read 52 books in 52 weeks. That's just not an offer here. So for me, it's about, okay, how can we engage in a series of positive behaviors consistently, so much so that an identity transformation occurs as we go up the competence ladder, which is something we can talk about in a minute, and get to unconscious competence and stay on that journey of mastery. Well, for me, it's about embodying the practices that I've laid out in the book. So each habit has a series of practices. When you engage in the practice consistently, when you iterate, tweak, take it to market, you'll start to engage in a series of positive behaviors. And there's a beautiful quote in there. I'm pretty sure it's from Wendy Wood, the psychologist. And it's the idea that 43% of our behaviors are automatic, on autopilot. So really what this book is designed to do is to get you to embody a series of behaviors through the practices laid out in the book, with the idea, with the hope that an identity transformation occurs in that process, and you embody certain communication habits, which will help you grow your influence with integrity.
I love the design and the intention that you've put into this. I like that you started out with some background on learning, and you get into let's work through the framework that you shared. I've never seen that framework shared in a triangle. I've always looked at it as a progression, this linear progression. So let's work through the linear progression from a learning perspective, talking about competence. And we work through, Robbie's go into the book. He's going to share the triangle or pyramid. I call it a triangle because it wasn't 3-dimensional, but it's the first time I've seen it organized that way. And the thing that I really like about organizing it that way is it shows that there's this foundation of something, and then things build into a narrow area of focus, which is very different than how I would have drawn it out before, which would be this kind of straight line. But let's go through those four stages. What are the 4 stages?
And by the way, is this also going to go out on video so I can show
It is. It's going to go out. This is on video. Yep.
If you can see on the screen there, that is exactly what Mike's talking about, the conscious competence learning model. And some debate as to the origins, but most people attribute it to a dude called Noel Birch in the 80s, but 70s even. But where we begin is unconscious incompetence, which, Mike, I know you do a lot of work with teams as a fractional and also in the consulting and training work that you do. And this is really where a lot of people don't know what they don't know. There's a lot of blind spots. And also, this is where resistance is high. This is where resistance is very high. It takes a growth mindset to actually go, where am I falling short? Where are my blind spots? And how can I work on them? But really, the phase after that is where you become aware of what you don't know. You lack proficiency, but you see the gift and the beauty and the opportunity, which is conscious incompetence. You're now conscious of your incompetence, which leads to the next phase, conscious competence, which is applying the newly learned skill or set of skills, but it can kind of feel a bit awkward. It's like, why does this not feel natural? You know what? I'm just going to go back to doing what I've always done. Or no. Just like riding a bike, which felt awkward at the start, which now feels natural. I've been here before. This is just one of those moments. Until we get to unconscious competence, which is when something is automatic. And I don't believe mastery is a destination. It's a journey. It's a lifestyle. And this is where you truly begin that.
love the way that you have it structured. And again, hadn't seen it structured that way because the visual representation of all of the things that we don't know or even don't know that we don't know is pretty powerful. And then as you start to narrow things in, you become aware. And then as you become aware, you can choose what do you want to change, where do you want to invest. And as you choose what you want to change and what you want to invest, you become highly proficient and you don't even realize that you don't know what you don't know. And if you think about it inside organizations, as you're working with teams and you're trying to take all of the really complex things that happen inside the business and shrink them down into simple processes that people can use from an onboarding perspective or start to make an impact inside their business. Remember that when you're talking to the subject matter experts, very rarely will they remember all of the bad things or all of the details or all the nuance. They will skip steps. So it's very important for you to apply, and this comes from Barry Diller, a beginner's mind perspective, which will help inform your comfort level in continuing to ask very simple questions over and over again to go a little bit deeper into the journey. So Ravi, I appreciate the learning aspect on the front end to set the context for learning as we adopt new behaviors and knowing that there's going to be resistance as we go through it. And as you work through that resistance, you'll start to build better resilience and get to the point where you start to build these capabilities. There's another habit I want to get into because it's one that I struggle with. And one of my biggest struggles when it comes to storytelling is, for whatever reason, I feel compelled to share the minute details that really don't matter. Like someone could say, well, it was about about 7 o'clock. No, it was 6:48. That doesn't add in. Then people tell me, it's like, hey, that doesn't really add value. What's your journey been on the storytelling side of things? How have you leaned into storytelling? Because you are a great storyteller and you tell stories with intention. And with each question that I've asked and that we've talked through, you've said things like, let me share an example. And you pull an example either from your perspective or somebody else's perspective. And you lean to others' perspectives as you go through. But it's your perspective on that perspective that's really powerful and helps people lean in. This is one of those things I'm working on getting better at. Can you share a little bit about your storytelling journey?
Well, I blame it on my mom. I blame it on my mum because when I was 8 or 9, she literally shoved me into the same dance school as my little sister. And I remember on the surface, I was angry. I was angry because it was this dirty little secret that I had, which I wanted nobody at school to know. And the secret did get out in the end, which is another story for another day. But internally, I was like, oh, hold on. This is kind of cool. Being on stage, doing a James Bond theme showcase. This is kind of cool. Eventually, I quit very quickly, within a year and a half or two. And I stumbled into theater. I had no idea, but my best friend's dad was a playwright by night. So one play led to another, which eventually led me to a lead role in a play which had the opportunity to appear at the National Youth Theatre over here in London. And I remember growing up, friends would say, hey man, are you going to take this whole speaking, presenting or acting thing seriously? Because we think you're pretty good at it. And in my head, I was like, are you serious? No, I want to go make some money. And I'd watched the movie Wall Street. And I remember Gordon Gekko saying greed is good. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I like that. I like that. So the version of me thought, you know what's my ticket to happiness? The version of me at the time said, you know what? Fast cars, money, the house, all of the things that we desire in the external world. That's what success looks like. And hey, I ended up on the trading floor at Citibank, where I began my sales career in corporate sales. And I remember very distinctly feeling like I had everything I desired on paper, but feeling empty. And I couldn't explain why. I didn't know why. I'd been chasing this thing for years. I'd said I had wanted this for years. But what I didn't realize is that I'd fallen in love with the perception of what it could be versus the reality. And hey, my ego loved the status it brought me. My ego loved everything it gave me in that sense. But the reality was I was out of alignment. So in 2016, in August, I said, yo, I'm out. Boom. And I resigned. And for the next 4 years, I had what I call the great experiment, aka a portfolio career. I tried TV presenting, coaching, radio, sales leadership in tech startups. And September 2020 came. I said, you know what? The middle of the pandemic, all this good stuff, I'm all in. And I realized in that moment that dance school, theater, investment banking, TV, all these different things were happening, or rather had happened for me, not to me. And it led me to realize that my greatest edge has always been communication, man. And now I was ready to bring it to the world. And hey, 5 years later, here we are.
Thank you for sharing the story in the background. What are some of the mistakes that for people like me who struggle with, or maybe even think I struggle with story, what are some of the things that I can look at to get better at story? And I know we've only got a little bit more time here as we kind of go through this, but what are some things that I can do if I think that I struggle with story? Actually, heck, coach me up. So I struggle with story. How can I get better?
Firstly, I just want to answer your question from prior. And by the way, I'm cool to go over time. I'm totally good.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the question you asked before was around where did I learn this stuff? And the idea was I'd subliminally and unconsciously been learning it for so long. But just like you've been unknowingly, unconsciously learning something that is your genius. So what I would say to people is that storytelling is a skill that can be learned, no doubt, and we're going to walk through it now, but don't expect to be delivering a TED talk tomorrow with millions of views if you're about to share your first story for the first time. Remember, we want to grow up the competence learning ladder. So let's start from the top. So tell me this, when it comes to your story, what is the underlying, or rather, what is the problem of the audience that your story will help solve?
Yeah. So for me personally, what drives me?
Okay.
I want to help people do the things they want to do better and faster.
So let's stay with that for a second. Help people do the things they want to do better and faster. Okay. So it sounds as though the problem is the inverse of that, meaning right now they can't do the things they desire better and faster.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So I'm just writing this down, by the way. So can't do things you want better and faster. So in one sentence, could you give me a practical example? Is it a leader who wants to do more one-on-one coaching, yet is stuck in the busy work?
Yeah. You just hit on the key piece there. It's get stuck. So they get stuck. So practical example could be, not hit my number in years. And I don't know why. There's a lot of noise that's out there. It could be that I'm in the wrong territory. I don't have the right opportunity. It could be any number of things, number of excuses that are potentially out there. I want to do it, but I don't know where or why. I don't know how to start. And my view is people should not fail because they lack systems or process. So the pain, and this is a challenge we run into. So and we're going through this inside the business. For who, for what, right? For who, for what? Be really clear on the ICP. So a good example would be, hey, I'm a sales rep. I'm in a role. I've not hit my number for a couple of years. I don't even know if this is the right thing for me. I want to do it. I enjoy aspects of it, but I'm stuck and I'm not getting what I need inside the organization.
Okay, beautiful. So it sounds as though, for what I'm hearing, if I had to boil the problem you solve down into one word, it's stuck.
Stuck. Get
Everything is stuck.
unstuck.
So let's run with that. So
Yep.
then, in one sentence, I'll explain why I'm seeking brevity in a moment, but in one
Perfect.
to two sentences max, what is the underlying root cause of somebody feeling stuck?
I'm working on being brief. The underlying root cause of someone feeling stuck is they know that there is more out there, but for some reason, they don't feel like they've been able to achieve it. So it's a combination of fear, it's a combination of perspective, it's a combination of uncertainty, it's a combination of doubt, it's a combination of confidence.
Beautiful. And the reason why I asked for the brevity was to receive the exact reaction that I did, which is stopping you in your tracks and allowing you to process in real time how to describe this problem in the most meaningful, punchy way as humanly possible. So it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, fear, doubt, and confidence are the underlying root causes. However, something that really interested me was when you said there is more out there, but they don't feel that they can, can't remember the exact words, but capture it. So do you mean more in themselves? Are we talking about unlocking their own full potential or something else?
That's it. It's unlocking their full potential. And typically, what ends up happening, and I might be jumping ahead of this, but so bring me back to reality. But typically, what ends up happening is they continue to allow themselves to be distracted by the noise while justifying that they're actually doing meaningful work because they're helping someone else or they're doing something that somebody else has asked for, rather than being really clear about and intentional about what they need in order to be able to move forward.
So what I would say on the back of what you've just said there, what I took from it and what had the most emotional charge in your language was the lack of clarity, which leads to, and you didn't say the word lack of clarity, but actually the word distraction made me pull that out. The lack of clarity, which means somebody's not unlocking their full potential. So now we've got the problem, which is stuck. We've got the underlying root cause, which is a lack of clarity. And the byproduct of that is somebody not reaching their full potential. So now what I would have you do, and we can do this in real time, is we would want to travel back in time to a personal or professional moment, not fast, where you have felt a lack of clarity, which suffocated your potential and made you feel stuck. So you don't have to say it, but do you have that moment in your mind? Have you got one now?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. So in one sentence, again, could you just describe that overall scenario? Like, was it at work, in a season of your life? Like, just tell me a little bit about it in one or two sentences.
I always wanted to start a business, but never had the guts to do so.
Incredible. Right. Want to start a biz, never had guts, in your words. Okay, beautiful. So now what we would do is now we would think about what is the medium in which we're going to be delivering this. So if we're looking at a speech, very different context, the keynote speech, to a conversation with somebody in your team, which has to be a 60 to 90-second story, right? Very, very different. So my question to you is, what context or medium, rather, would you like us to filter this through, or rather work towards? Speech, conversation, or client pitch, let's say. Let's say those are the three options.
Let's do speech.
Speech. Okay, beautiful. So what I would say here is the following. So if it's a speech, once again, for those of you listening in, we're looking at the problem of feeling stuck, the root cause being a lack of clarity, and the byproduct being somebody not unlocking their full potential. The audience is clearly entrepreneurs, because that's the story that Mike is really connected to here. And the story that we're going to pull on in a second is Mike wanting to start his own business, but never having the guts, in his words. So now we've got that and we're looking at a speech. So let's say Mike has got a 30-minute keynote speech that he needs to deliver. Now, here's what I would have him think about. If we look at any great story, it has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. So the first thing I would do is not start crafting the story. I would say, what modules go into the beginning, the middle, and the end? And what I believe is that a speech, how I craft them, the beginning would have 2 modules, the middle would have 2 modules, and the end would have 2 modules. But the first module in the beginning is starting with a personal story. Okay, so we're going to look at how to do that in a second. Before we do that, how long should the story be? Well, if you've got a 30-minute keynote, the first thing I would think about is shaving the talk time. So I'm going to take 10 to 15% off that talk time immediately. Why? To account for tech mishaps, people running over, or whatever it could be. Okay, so let's take 10 minutes off that talk time. So that means you're actually delivering a 27-minute keynote speech. Okay. Now, what does that mean in terms of your story? Roughly, let's say that story could be around 3 minutes long, right? 3 to 4 minutes long. And that is the first module. Okay. Now, remember, the story has to deeply connect with the audience. Why? Because we need to make them feel significant. So the story we're crafting is around Mike wanting to start a business, but never having the guts. Now, the arc that we would work towards here, and it's something I talk about in the book, is the 4 C's. Okay. The 4 C's are context, conflict, change, conclusion. Okay. Now, context is where we introduce the main character, Mike, who has a specific desire, wanting to start his own business. Conflict is when he experiences a specific problem, aka a villain, which is preventing him from reaching the promised land. And then we have change, which is the aha moment, which changes everything. And then we have the conclusion where the transformation occurs and Mike goes from pain to glory. Okay. Now, that's a story arc, but what we're looking to share is something which sits into a story framework. Once again, something I talk about in the book. Okay. So hook, story, impact, conscious question. So I'll give an example. The hook could be, have you ever felt like you were meant for more, but the last 10 years would tell you you're not? I'm just making this up, right? But something like that, a question which initiates a search in the audience's mind for an answer. Okay. So we're talking about a hook. So Mike would start with a hook. And then, and by the way, what I would actually do with Mike was I'd sit down with him for an hour, probably in 90 minutes. And I would ask him a ton of questions so that we can really think about what goes in at the right point. And is this relevant to share? How much do we need to share? But for just looking at it in this context, what I would then have Mike think about is, okay, which moment are we flying the audience into in this given moment? Which moment, okay? And it's probably going to be when self-doubt was at its highest, okay? When Mike had this specific desire to start his own business, but hold on, there was this villain, which is keeping him feeling stuck. And this is when we really want to connect to the audience, using the same language that they probably use right now in their 9 to 5 to describe why they can't go do the thing, okay? And this villain is preventing Mike from reaching the promised land, as I said. Okay. But then Mike has this moment, this aha moment, which changes everything. So for me, in the personal story that I shared probably about 10, 15 minutes ago now, it was realizing that everything that I thought I desired wasn't so. Okay. And I realized that what I was chasing actually felt deeply out of alignment. That was the catalyst for change. So what was that for Mike? And then what is the transformation? Okay. He went from pain to glory. And this is very, very, very important, because if you want to be somebody's trusted guide, people want to know that you've done the thing that they wish to do. Okay. Now, the story in itself, we can talk about, how to frame certain things that go into it, but we want to make sure we show and we don't tell. So Mike could say, and he wouldn't, but Mike could say, and I felt like a failure. Or he could say, and I remember coming home that night and sitting across from my wife. And she said, "Hey, honey, how's your day going?" And I didn't have the guts to tell her that not great, because right now I felt like I was letting her down. I was letting the kids down. And I just felt like a failure. It's very, very different. It has a very, very different energy, showing versus telling. So we would script in the most beautiful ways for you, but then we would move, okay, after the story. So we've got the hook. Mike's asking a question to the audience. Then we've got the story, which is the story arc. And then we've got the impact, which is, hey. Here's why this matters to you. 100 people in this audience. Here's why this matters to you, because every single one of you are still sitting down. You haven't left. You haven't gone to the toilet, which means that you also felt like a failure at some point in your life, just like me. But you also know that you are meant for something more, just like me. And my question to you is if you stay exactly as you are, if in a year's time you are back in this room and nothing's changed, that would be the biggest failure. Hey, my name is Mike Simmons. What's happening, everybody? And I'm here to teach you bang, 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 bang. The question I'd love to ask you is, and then we would move to a conscious question, and it could be, picking up on something that you saw from the audience, or it could be not asking a conscious question altogether because it doesn't make sense to do so for the context in question. As a result, you just move with hook, story, impact. Now, I've just done a ton of talking. Okay. And I just want to pause. I want to break. But how are you receiving that? And actually, I should have asked 25 minutes ago in my Shakespearean monologue, do you have any questions?
Yeah, Ravi, my question is, how do I schedule time to work with you? So this is what happens when you bring people into a conversation who have deep expertise and deeply care about the change that they're working on creating in the world. Ravi was able to take small components of a story, pull together a compelling event, work through his framework, and have this arc that brings people together. And he highlighted a couple of different things for me. Number one, I fall into the trap of telling rather than showing. As much as I care about the detail around, no, that happened at 6:48, not about 7. I'm still telling that rather than bringing people into the experience, painting that picture. The other thing that resonated for me is the connection with the audience. And what you realize over time, especially when you have kids, you realize everybody wants their kids to be able to come home and feel like they're in a safe place where they can congregate, where they can have a conversation, where they can break bread, where they can share food. And that happens whether you are in the UK or you're in Arizona. This is a global thing. So the connection at a human level is there because we all have these different experiences and these journeys that we've gone through. So Ravi, I appreciate you going through that and demonstrating an amazing level of skills, both with the questions you asked and the narrative that you started to put together. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, man. I received that. I appreciate it. And for those of you listening, which are like, whoa, where do I actually begin? Well, there's a beautiful quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who says, "The creation of 1,000 forests is in one acorn." And I deeply believe that The creation of 1,000 relationships is in one story. So just begin by crafting one story that you can test, tweak, and iterate. And once you've done it, I have something for you called the Acorn Checklist. Okay, and I'm going to walk you through it now really quickly. But A stands for, does your story, look at it afterwards, after you've crafted your story, does your story actively interrupt somebody's trail of thought? AKA, does it have a hook? Does it have a hook which captures people's attention and once again initiate a search for an answer in the listener's mind that they just need an answer for, right? For the question that you've posed. C, does it contain a story arc? Remember, context, conflict, change, conclusion. O is, does it organically add business value? This is the impact. Hey, here's why this matters to you. R is, does it revive a two-way dialogue? And this is more for a conversation, but instead of it being a one-way, hey, I'm just going to tell you a story, does it end with a conscious question that revives a two-way dialogue? And we can walk through that, what that looks like in a conversation. And then N is, does it noticeably make your main character the hero? Meaning, it should show you as a guide, not the guru. Now, I say this because, actually, I really should let the audience know this. In your context that we just shared of your story, we need to make sure that you aren't seen as the hero. This is a personal story we're talking about. You aren't seen as the hero. The audience can see themselves in your pains, desire, and transformation, allowing them to imagine what it would look like if they could become the hero of their narrative. In the book, I talk about sharing a social proof story about how somebody went from pain to glory, just like the person you're connecting with. In that sense, you would noticeably need to ensure your main character is the hero, not you, your product or service. Yeah. So there's that. And hey, I'm paraphrasing here, but there's something beautiful that American neuroscientist Paul Zak said, Dr. Paul Zak, and he said, hey, if everything fails, you just talk about human struggle and end with triumph. Yeah, right? If all else fails, just do that. And you're on your way.
Ravi, you are awesome. Thank you very much. Where can people find out more about you? Where do you want to send folks?
Well, in this season of my life, one thing that's really important to me is the book, my book, Relationship Currency, which is out on November 4th. So if you feel called and compelled to pre-order a copy, that would be incredible. And the link to do so will be in the description of this podcast, I'm sure. And hey, there's a few cool pre-order bonuses as well, if you do feel like it's for you.
Pick up the book. It is worth it. Follow Ravi. It is worth it. So, Ravi, thank you for doing this. Really appreciate the conversation. If you know somebody who would enjoy the conversation, get value out of this, please share it with them. And let them know that they can find their catalyst at findmycatalyst.com. Thank you.